Thanks. Okay, so today we are going to start off by just having a real brief discussion of some of the stuff that you read about yesterday. Our big topic is decolonization and the creation of new nation states. You see that an awful lot after World War II. I mean, really, the world maps changed quite a bit. World War II has some very far reaching ramifications. What we're going to be talking about over the next week or so, obviously, we're talking about decolonization and new nations today. But at the same time, kind of going on concurrently, is this massive Cold War between the United States and the Soviets, where we don't like them, they don't like us. And believe it or not, that rivalry shapes a lot of the history of the 20th century, not just for our two countries, but really globally. It's pretty crazy stuff. Focusing more on the Cold War, we'll get into it a little bit tomorrow, but starting mainly next week. Today, though, let's talk about decolonization. So, got a few slides of this PowerPoint. There's like tiny bit you may want to write down, but it's more just expanding on the notes that you took yesterday. Once that's done, I got two separate videos. The first one's a crash course, give you a good broader understanding of decolonization worldwide. The second, we're going to look at one specific new nation state and all the controversies around it. We'll talk about the creation of modern day Israel, which is pretty darn significant. Once that's done, I anticipate us ending a little bit early. Hard to say exactly how early, but I'm thinking 20 minutes, maybe 15, maybe more, maybe less. Whatever time we have left, if you need to work on the stuff from yesterday, have at it. If there's anything else you need to work on, have at it. Tomorrow, I'm not going to be here in the afternoon. So unfortunately, and I hate to do this more than once a week, you are going to have a little bit of book work again tomorrow, introducing the Cold War, but I swear it will not be that much. It's mainly reading. You'll have a little bit of vocab to do, but that is it. That'll be the last part of what you need in your notebook. Hopefully, it's going to be a small enough amount of work tomorrow that if you can finish early, again, that would be a good opportunity to catch up if you're missing anything. Things coming up tomorrow night, 11:45. That extra credit quiz is going to close. So please take advantage of that if you feel that you need to. And then finally, notebook check. We'll add in the last bit of notes tomorrow. It is going to be due on Monday before midnight. It is a daily grade, but it will average together with your first notebook check for your second test grade. We should be able to fit in a third test grade before the end of the 5 weeks, 6 weeks. But I'm telling you, not going to be as many grades. I don't even know if we're going to have any more daily grades in 6 weeks. If we do, there might be one. So just keep that in mind. If you're missing stuff, really important you get everything in as soon as you can. Any questions about any of that good fun stuff? Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Decolonization. Yesterday, you had your book work. You read about decolonization after 1900. You read about the creation of some brand new independent nation states. You had some vocab. You had some other things that you need to put in your notebook. I'm thinking there's probably going to be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 broad things in your notebook. Each one of them are going to be worth 20 points. So each one of these, 8.5 stuff, 8.6 stuff, 20 points in your notebook. So like I said, just plan accordingly. There's not going to be a whole bunch in this notebook check, but it means the things that are in it are that much more valuable. So just kind of a brief introduction. Why is all this stuff going down at this point in history? Again, World War II, it opens the floodgates for change. After the global conflict of World War II, the largely unfulfilled hopes of greater colonial self-government after World War I were revived. Remember, World War I, a lot of these colonies, a lot of these conquered peoples thought, hey, finally, we're going to get our freedom. We're going to get self-rule. That didn't happen, especially in Africa and Asia. People in Europe, by and large, that were a part of those larger empires, they got self-determination. They got their own nation states. But because of the inherent racism of the times, people like Woodrow Wilson said, hey, self-determination really only for white people. Really messed up. So there's a lot of animosity because of that, rightfully so. People in Africa, people in the Middle East, people in Asia, they're really waiting for their opportunity. So it's not that they ever gave up their hopes for freedom. They just kind of, let that tension simmer until the opportunity was right. After World War II, for many, the opportunity is right. Colonies' desire for independence became intertwined with a global ideological conflict between capitalist countries led by the United States and communist countries led by the Soviet Union. This is the Cold War. And even though it's mainly between these two countries, almost the entire world would kind of have to pick sides. This desire for decolonization does kind of factor into that. In the colonized world, movements for self-determination grew. Often they included both advocates of greater self-rule and proponents of full independence. World War II had so weakened Great Britain, France, and the other colonial powers that they had fewer resources to resist independence. Now that's a key. Great Britain and France especially, man, cost a lot of money to wage that war. France was really devastated in their homeland. So on one hand, they kind of needed the colonies because, that's revenue, that's money coming in. That's what colonization is all about. But on the other hand, they had just wrapped up a war justifying fighting the Axis powers because they were conquering and ruling over people that didn't want to be ruled over. And now their militaries, if these colonies really want independence and are really willing to push for it, there's not going to be a whole lot that they're going to be able to do to stop it. Again, it's a bunch of circumstances that come together that kind of lead to this big wave of colonization or decolonization, excuse me. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union gave anti-colonial activists two superpowers to recruit as supporters. We're going to get more into that next week. Independence was granted to some peacefully. However, others would have to fight for it. I would write down the stuff here on the right because you need to be able to reference some examples of places that said, hey, we want our independence, and ultimately didn't have to wage a war for it. They were able to negotiate. They were able to use diplomacy to get what they wanted. You do also need some examples of places that really did have to fight for that independence. So some good examples. They're ones that you read about yesterday of negotiated independence. We've got India from the British. The video we're going to watch first gets into India quite a bit. You've probably heard of Mohandas Mahatma Gandhi. He's probably the most central figure, the most famous figure of the nonviolent efforts to win independence, and ultimately they do from Great Britain. You got the African Gold Coast from the British. You guys read about Kwame Nkrumah yesterday, the first president of Ghana. He and Ghana, they're located in that region. You also got wide swaths of West Africa from the French. Here are some examples, though, of places that did have to fight. Because like I said, even though a lot of places were granted their independence, a lot of European countries didn't want to give up their colonies. Algeria from the French, being right across from France, they kind of saw this as a natural extension of France. A lot of French people lived there. The Algerians obviously felt differently, so they waged war. Angola from the Portuguese, very, very violent conflict, lasted for many years. And of course, Vietnam from the French. We kind of talked about this earlier. Remember, the United States goes over to help the French leave, we stick around. That's the short of it, of kind of how we get involved in the Vietnam War. That is going to be something that's going to come up again during the Cold War. We'll go into the Vietnam War in more depth next week. So again, couple examples, know some places that negotiated, know some places that had to fight. Again, at least kind of knowing that both options were on the table, both options were used to varying degrees of success, could help you out in the near future. Now, on the following slide, we got a map, just kind of showing you just how expansive this was in Africa, Asia, various parts of Asia. You look here at the map and the map key. You know, you got the areas in green that were controlled by the French before World War II. You've got the areas in purple controlled by the British. You got the areas in kind of the orange controlled by the Dutch. Indonesia is one of those places that will declare their independence and have to fight the Dutch for it. You got the areas in light blue, mainly, you know, what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo and some of the surrounding areas controlled by Belgium. You got, and it's not a whole lot, but you got the areas kind of in the pink by the Spanish. You got the areas in the, God, I don't even know how to describe that. The very ugly greenish yellow by Italy. You got all the areas that the Japanese had conquered. You've got American colonies like the Philippines. And then you've got areas that would be dependent, kind of in that very kind of weird bluish purple at the end, that would unfortunately remain dependent states until later on. They will get their freedom eventually, but it's a long time. That is a lot of different places breaking away. A lot of different places that were colonies that eventually will become countries of their own. Hence the big phrase, this is decolonization. And in the 40s, the 50s, even into the 60s, you see arguably the creation of more nation states, independent nations, than you had in all of history up to that point. That is one of the major ramifications of the Second World War. You've also got these sort of transnational movements. And I want to say I've had you define these all before, so don't feel like you absolutely have to. But there were these ideas that, you know what, different people that have, you know, a sense of unity. The workers, the Arab world, the African world, you know, there was a desire for some to do away with these national borders and just kind of unite with people that had those similarities. You had communism, you know, really kind of dreaming of running through most of Asia. They got a lot of it. You've got the Arab Muslim world. Doesn't actually happen, but there were people that said, you know what, here in the Middle East and North Africa, we need to unite under our common, you know, religious and ethnic heritage. They called that Pan-Arabism. There were also the desires, you know, in Africa south of the Sahara to kind of unite under this ideology of Pan-Africanism. Pan meaning, you know, let's bring it all together. This doesn't ever become a reality, but that dream is one of the things that prompts more and more people to really desire independence. Last slide of the day before we get into decolonization, the crash course. Here are some prominent leaders, most of them you read about yesterday. So look at your notes. If you maybe missed one of these guys, you might be able to jot some of this down, okay? You at least need to be able to recognize their names, know what country they're related to, and kind of identify them as prominent nationalist leaders, people kind of pushing for independence for the good and the bad during this time period. So, and they're kind of pictured left to right and then down. First, left-hand side, you've got Kwame Nkrumah. He's the first president of Ghana. He's the one that negotiated independence and helped modernize the economy. Unfortunately, he eventually assumes dictatorial powers and eventually is overthrown in a military coup. Next to him, you've got Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt. He's, I believe, the second president of modern Egypt. He led a military coup, and he was a big proponent of Pan-Arabism. Not just controlling Egypt, he thought all of North Africa, all of the Middle East needs to unite, maybe not necessarily under his leadership, but under some. His policies blended Islam and socialism, you know, obviously a lot of government control of the economy, but also, you know, a lot of the guiding principles of the legal system and politics kind of guided by the Islamic faith. Mohandas Gandhi, probably the most famous of all of them. He's from India. He was the leader of the Indian National Congress, this group that was formed specifically to push for independence, to try to figure out a way to break away peacefully from Great Britain. Bless you. He helped independence, Indian independence, using nonviolent resistance. Being a Hindu, he was very much into nonviolence. You'll see that in the video here in a second. So essentially, he's fighting for independence, but he's not hurting anybody. He's not killing anyone. He's using protests. He's using civil disobedience. He's using boycotts and sit-ins and, different things to try to gain attention from the international community that what the British were doing in India just isn't right. And because of his use of nonviolence, it took a long time, but eventually he does help to achieve India's independence. His methods will go on to inspire a lot of other nonviolent leaders, especially in the 1950s and 60s. In the United States, Martin Luther King Jr., the American Civil Rights Movement. A lot of his methods were directly inspired by Mohandas Gandhi. In South Africa, where they had that racist system of apartheid, which was legalized segregation, similar to what we had here in the United States, but actually way worse. You had, like I said, Nelson Mandela used a lot of the same techniques. Gandhi inspired a lot of other great men to achieve things largely through nonviolent means. You've got Gandhi's counterpart, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He's involved in the independence movement in India, leading the Muslim League, but he's the one that's basically saying, hey, once we gain independence, there's been so much historical animosity in India between Muslims and Hindus, with Hindus being the majority, that, hey, we need to break apart. We need a country of our own. So after India gains its independence, one of the first things they do, they partition the land, being that they separate it, with the largest chunk, obviously, India, predominantly Hindu in population. The new country of Pakistan comes out of India, created predominantly for the Muslim population. You got Ho Chi Minh, communist leader of Vietnam. His desire for independence and the fact that the French would not grant it is really what kind of instigates the Vietnam War. We get involved not so much that we care that France, maintains its colony. We get involved because we hate communism. And this is going to be a long-lasting and very unpopular war in American history, mainly because, we didn't want them to be communists. We thought communism was going to spread. And it did a little bit, but not to the degree that we thought it would. Finally, you got Pol Pot. He is the communist leader of Cambodia. Him and his crew, the Khmer Rouge, were real scumbags. The killing fields were kind of coined as a term after him. He was similar to Stalin in that he wasn't going to put up with anybody that challenged his rule. He launches a virtual genocide that led to the death of 2 million people. So sometimes, obviously, when these different groups gain their independence, sometimes it doesn't turn out well. Sometimes it does. All right, first video of the day. It's all about decolonization. It's a crash course. I think it'll really broaden your understanding based on what we've talked about, based on what we've read. You do not need to take notes unless you want to, but pay attention. Stay awake, pay attention. That's all you really have to do for the rest of the day. This one's about 10 minutes. The second one's about 10 minutes. Then we will be done. We'll just kind of have to see how much extra time we have. It doesn't look like we're going to have a whole bunch, but like I said, just watching videos, paying attention, comparing it to what we read, what we talked about. That's pretty easy. So pay attention, stay awake, take notes if you really want to, but as long as you're paying attention, I will be a happy capper. This first one deals a lot with what you read about yesterday, especially that first part. What is decolonization all the time?
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to talk about decolonization. The Empire's European states formed.
You guys online, go ahead and watch the videos, and good luck. If you need anything, let me know.
Many of the nation states we know and love today. Yes, I'm looking at you for a review. Did you ever know you